Well, thank you, Peter, for such a warm introduction. It's definitely an honor and a privilege to be here with so many great speakers today and to share the impact of the supernatural presence of God and His Word, the Word of God, and as it affects our business dealings or how it can affect it. Today, as you know, I'm going to be talking about the Moses questioning strategy and how there are 7 questions that you should ask every prospect that you're hoping to do business with. So let's get right into it. Question number 1 I want to ask you is, which stimulates the brain more? Is it when somebody tells you a fact about their product or service? Is that what stimulates your brain? Or is it when someone asks you a question? Which is more stimulating? Which makes you think more? Well, the foundation for critical thinking, when they were doing a paper on the role of Socratic questioning based on Socrates, of course, came with the conclusion, thinking is not driven by answers, but by questions. And you want your prospects to think, not just listen. You want them to think and follow along with you. See, questions trigger a mental reflex known as instinctive elaboration, and they make us think. And that's what you want. You want your prospects to think. You don't want them to glaze over while you're talking. You want to have them engaged, because when you ask someone a question, it literally takes over the brain's thought process. And when your brain is thinking about the answer to a question, it really can't contemplate anything else. Now, some people think, oh, I can think of 2 things at once. But in point of fact, scientifically, your brain is going from one thought to the other, back and forth at lightning speed. This, that, like windshield wipers on hyperspeed or something, because the neuroscience has proven you can only think of one thing at a time. But let me talk about hiccups, for example. Everybody's had hiccups, right? But let me ask something. When you have hiccups and you try to stop them, you've tried what? Drinking water, holding your breath, hanging upside down, whatever. But here's something that'll absolutely work. I was on the phone with a gentleman, a friend of mine, and I was hiccuping, and I said, excuse me, I kept on hiccuping. And he said, Michael, let me ask you a question. I said, okay, hiccup. He said, what color is that hiccup? I thought that was a crazy question, but I thought I'll go along. So I thought, okay, and I began to imagine it was a blue color, and I said, it's blue. And I think that was probably the end of it. But what happened was I stopped hiccuping. And he said that works almost every single time. What color is that hiccup? See, the impact of asking the right question at the right time is so powerful that it can actually stop hiccups on the spot. Try it. The next time you see someone that you know who starts to hiccup, ask them, hey, what color is that hiccup? Or even go further. I sometimes go further. And you could ask yourself the same question. I say it to myself when I get hiccups. What color is that hiccup? I'll say, what size is it? What shape is it? What's the texture like? Because I found that when I do that, it interrupts my pattern. You see, it forces you to think about the question, which has absolutely no answer, right? What color is the hiccup? Well, there's no color to the hiccup. But 9 times out of 10, it'll stop the hiccups. That's the power of asking a question, because it basically captures your brain and takes it in a direction so powerfully it can stop hiccups. Now, one thing at a time. Research in neuroscience has found that our brain can only think about one idea at a time. Even though you may think of 2, as I said, it's like a windshield wiper, left, right, it can only do 1 at a time. So when you ask somebody a question, you force their minds to consider only your question. And it distracts the brain even from the hiccup response. Now, if you want to tell somebody something, you can do it in the form of a question. You can actually share facts in a question form. For example, you could say, hey, well, did you know that Jesus asked 307 questions in the Bible? Most of them were in response to the 183 questions that he was asked, but he directly answered less than 10. No, I didn't know that. And they're thinking about what you just said. And you can go on and say, yes, Jesus was 40 times more likely to answer a question with another question than he was to give a direct answer. Wow, that's powerful. So I just shared information, but by asking a question. So why is this important? Why do you want to ask questions? Well, not only does it stimulate the brain or capture it, if you will, lasso it, kind of bring it over to where you want them to go, but also we as people, we tend to believe 100% of what comes out of our mouth and something less of what comes out of somebody else's, kind of depending on who they are, whether it's a salesperson you don't know or whether it's your spouse or whoever it is. And so your confidence level will fluctuate depending on who the speaker is. But generally speaking, if you're saying it, you believe it 100%. So that's why you want to ask somebody a question, because the information that comes from their mouth, they're going to believe 100%. And that's what you want. You want them to be 100% bought in. So you lead them through questioning. Now, according to the Association for Psychological Science, they said that research from a team of Harvard psychological scientists, shows that asking more questions, and in particular asking more follow-up questions, increases people's positive impressions. You see, when you say to somebody, how are you? And they say, man, I'm feeling rough. And you go, and how'd the game go yesterday? That's not a follow-up question. But if you said, how are you doing today? And they said, I'm not doing so well. I said, really, what's going on? Well, my child's at home sick. What's wrong with the child? And these follow-up questions, whether it's personal or in business, when you drill down on a follow-up question, the science has actually measured this, and it increases people's positive impressions of you. Contrast that with this. The study goes on to say that the tendency to focus on the self when trying to impress others is absolutely misguided. As verbal behaviors that focus on the self, such as redirecting the topic of conversation to yourself, or bragging, boasting, or dominating the conversation, tend to decrease the liking of you. They tend not to like you. And listen, whether you're liked or not is not the most important factor when it comes to sales, but it's very important, because people like to buy from people they like. They don't like to buy with somebody they don't like. Now, sometimes you'll say, I really don't like that guy, but it's the only place I can get it, so we got to do business there. But we tend to want to do business with somebody we like. So bear that in mind. Now, there's more research. The Elev8 Corporation showed that salespeople asking 5 or more questions closed 72% more sales than people asking 2 questions or less. Think about that. Supposing you're a salesperson that's not in the habit of asking questions. And let's just say, for argument's sake, for easy numbers, that you're making $50,000 a year in sales right now. And you start asking 5 or more questions, and you can close 72% more sales. Your income just went from $50,000 to over $85,000 just because you learned to ask questions. So important, so important. And listen, there was a survey done back in 1993, and it was 40,000 people. It wasn't 40 people. It wasn't like everybody on my street. 40,000 people. And the study revealed that just by asking someone if they were going to purchase a new car within 6 months, their purchase rates increased by 35%. 35%. Imagine the marketing uses of that. Imagine just asking somebody a question. Have you considered doing such and such today? Have you considered whether it's a new car, a new bicycle, have you ever considered getting your teeth fixed? Whatever it is, right? You ask a question, 35% more people are going to actually take action just because you ask them the question. Why? Because it stimulates the brain to be thinking about that topic when they weren't otherwise. It's very good. In fact, I ran into a gentleman recently, and he said a customer came in, and he has a retail store, and asked him about his teeth. And it bothered him so much, but guess what? He's getting them fixed because it bothered him. It got him to say, I got to do something about this. And he's doing that. So it's a very powerful force. You don't want to underestimate the power of questions. Now, I got a question for you. If Jesus modeled the use of questions, and if science validates the superiority of using questions, where can we find a biblical model for questioning that applies to business and sales? Where? Well, I got a good example for you. It's the promised land. It's the story, and you've got to catch this story, friends. It's so important. When you catch this, you start implying this, your sales will go through the roof. You can actually multiply your sales simply by utilizing what I'm about to share with you. Now, there's a story in the Bible, we know, a true story, when Moses led the people out of Egypt. They went through the Red Sea, they went across the wilderness, and they got to the border of the promised land. Okay, they got there, and they're looking at that, and it's like, this is where the promise is. This is where they can go. And they knew that when they went in there, a few things were going to happen. Number one, because God had promised them the land, it was going to be theirs, but they knew that the people that lived there might not be too excited about that. The people that lived there might actually say, I don't think so, pal. I mean, it's not likely that the Canaanites, the Girgashites, the Hittites, and Amorites, and all those Jebusites, all those people, it's not likely that they say, oh man, I'm so glad you Israelites got here. Here's the keys to my house, my car, my dog, my whatever it is. It's all yours. I got goats in the back. I got cows in the field. Here you go. Enjoy. We know that wasn't it. They know, and we knew, they knew, and we know rather, that they were going to be met with resistance, obviously. But if there was resistance, we also know there's risk. Correct? These people weren't going to resist like with a sign saying, get off my property. No, they were going to fight possibly to the death. And so resistance and risk, if they were successful, there would be reward. Now, when I thought about those three things, resistance, risk, and reward, I realized that's business. That's what you and I do every day. We get resistance from our competition. We get resistance from skeptical prospects. We get resistance from all corners. We get resistance from our coworkers many times. Oh, that's a dumb idea. We get resistance in many forms, many times. Friends, family, competitors, you name it. And we go on anyway. We push on anyway. And there's risk. What are we risking? Wasting our time, our money, our earning opportunities. There's a lot that's at risk here. Our career, our future, our hopes, our dreams, all could be dashed. But if we're right, if we're successful, if we push through, there's reward. We get the sale, we get the promotion, we get the deal, we get all those things. It's a wonderful thing. So where do you find this? So what's this got to do with Moses and questions? Well, let me tell you something. There's a passage in Numbers 13. Here it is, verses 17 to 20. And it says, and Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan. And he said to them, go up through the south and into the mountains and see the land, what it is, and the people that dwell there, whether they are strong or weak, few or many, and whether the land they dwell in is good or bad, and the cities they dwell in, are they intense or they live in strongholds, and whether the land is fat or lean, and whether there is any wood there or not, be of good courage and bring back some of the fruit of the land. Well, folks, when I read that, it occurred to me, there's 7 questions. Now, when I see 7 in the Bible, I know that's a divine footprint, a divine stamp, if you will. Because you see, there's the 7 days of creation, there's the 7 spirits of God, there's the 7 days of the week. There's 7 throughout the Bible, and it means completion, fullness, perfection. So when I saw that Moses had to have 7 questions answered, and we know what those questions are, I spent the next 2 days in my office on my knees on the carpet in my office and seeking God over these 3 or 4 verses and saying, Lord, what are the implications of these questions for business? And what is the application? And I developed it. It took me a few days to do that. How many of you are willing to spend 2 days, 3 days, whatever, on a single passage of scripture just to labor in it and seeking God to show you the wisdom? It's what I do, and it's what I've been doing for decades. Let me show you the treasure trove that I found for you, because it will absolutely change your life. You ready? Here goes. First of all, as I noted, there are 7 questions. And here it is. I've got them laid out in question form. So Moses sent them to spy out the land, go up to the south, to the mountains, see the land. Question number 1, what it is. He wanted to know the lay of the land. Like this, what are we looking at? Is it mountainous? Is it fertile ground? Is it swampy? Give me the general overview, lay of the land. Number 2, whether the people that dwell in, are they strong or are they weak? Because that was going to be a measure of the resistance they were going to get. So he had to know the answer to that question. And bear in mind, he lived in the time roughly, you don't know exactly, of Sun Tzu, the Chinese warlord, if you will, back 3,000 years ago. We've got a book out now, that's popular years ago called The Art of War. Well, this Chinese general was very astute at these things. And so when it came to the lay of the land, he said, there are 7 different types of land. There's rocky, there's marshy, there's fertile, there's mountainous, there's box canyons, whatever. And so it was very important as a general, a military general, to get the lay of the land. And that's what Moses is doing. And then he wants to know the size of the people. Are they strong? Are they weak? He wants to know, are they few or many? Because they're strong, but there's only 3 of them. We got it made. They're weak, but there's 5 million of them. We may have a problem. So he wants to know strong or weak, few or many. And then he goes on and says, and whether the land they dwell in is it good or bad? Is it good or bad? Question number 5, in the cities they dwell in, are they tents? Or do they live in strongholds? In other words, are they going to take up and run with their tents, gone here today, gone tomorrow kind of thing? Or they got fortified fortresses? What are we up against? Number 6, whether the land is fat or lean. Now, you notice he just said, is it good or bad? Now he's wanting to know, is it fat or lean? I'm going to explain to you the difference and how that'll affect your sales. And lastly, number 7, he says, and find out, if you would, is there any wood there? He wants to know if there's any wood. And finally, he says, be of good courage and bring back some of the fruit of the land. So, what is this all about? Well, I studied this thing out, and I'm telling you, what I'm about to share with you will blow your mind. But as it happened, I had a sales call with a client. I was stopping by the client's office. They were an air conditioning wholesale company. That means they sold a certain brand of air conditioning equipment to major contractors like, ABC City Heat and Air or Joe's Heat and Air or whatever. And those companies that would sell their brand. In this case, they were selling Rheem. That was the brand that my client sold to their contractors. And I ran into the president, I believe it was on a Tuesday. And he said, Michael, we've been calling on one contractor, and this was a big contractor. I mean, citywide, a big, big contractor. And we've been calling on him twice a month for 6 years. He said, we have brought his crew breakfast, lunch, even dinner. He said, my wife and I have been over at his house for dinner, and that man and his wife have been over at our house for dinner. We've gone to movies together, but in 6 years, he said, I haven't got a nickel's worth of business. What would you do? Well, I just discovered the Moses questioning strategy. I mean, I hadn't told anybody about it at all. I just found it, and I said to him, well, if it were me, I'd ask him 7 questions. Now, he looked at me like, that's a strange response. And I said, well, they're not really 7 questions. They're 7 categories, 7 topics. And I would delve in those areas. And he looked at me still a little bit bewildered, and he said, would you write them out for me? I said, sure. So I wrote them out, and I got the list right here, front and back, and the inside. This is the actual document from 25 years ago, or more than that, actually. So I had that document. I made it up for him, and he went out on Wednesday, and he asked every question on the list. I didn't mean for him to ask every single question. I just meant these are topics, pick some questions under each topic. But he asked all of them. It's a long meeting. But he uncovered things about his friend and prospect that in 6 years of being good old boy, buddy, friendly, as important as that is, in 6 years of that, he didn't know what he found out that day. Because he didn't know the strategic questions to ask for. He knew nothing about the battle for the heart. He knew nothing about leading somebody through a process of questioning. He was practicing what so many people do, is what I call the good old boy thing. Hey, let's go out for lunch. Let's go here. Let's do that. And they're just friends long enough you think, oh, eventually he's going to buy from me. Sometimes they do, but it's not good enough. So he asked these questions all on Wednesday, and the gentleman was so intrigued, he asked for a proposal, which he got on Thursday. And on Friday, my client got a purchase order for $60,000. Now think of it, 6 years, twice a month, no business. One time, asking the Moses questioning strategy questions, and he gets a purchase order for $60,000. Now you might think, well, maybe that was just lucky. Maybe it was about time he ordered. Maybe maybe this was like the straw that broke the camel's back. You can think that if you want to, my friend, but I'm going to tell you something. My client didn't think that, not for a minute, not for a minute. In fact, he called an emergency sales meeting. He had, I think it was 18 salespeople. He serviced a multi-state area, Tennessee, Arkansas, and Kentucky. I think it was the states. It may be Alabama. I can't remember. But anyway, 2 or 3 states that he serviced. He called 18 guys together. He put them in a room. He put me in front of the room, and he said, I don't know what this is. And he held up this piece of paper. He said, I don't know what it is, and I don't know why it works, but I want every one of you doing it, every one of you using it. Now, this was the end of March. And that's important because this is a seasonal business. It's air conditioning, right? Their air conditioning units don't break down so much in January. But we're at the end of March, heading into April, when things start to warm up in Middle Tennessee. Well, as it turned out, the previous April, they had done $1.2 million in revenue. Their goal for this April was 1.3, hoping for a $100,000 increase. But what he did differently than any other year was he made it mandatory that every salesperson take that questionnaire and ask every prospect that they spoke to the questions and bring them through that process. They were required to do that. They were not receptive to the idea. They didn't like the idea. They thought some of the questions were absolutely stupid. They weren't, but that's what they thought at first. But we got to the end of April, and I called on him, I think the first week of May. I said, hey, how did the month turn out for you? Well, the color was gone from his face. I said, what happened? He said, well, and he told me what he did. They did not do 1.2 or 1.3 or 4 or 5 or 6 or even 7. They did $1.7.5 million. 1.7.5 the next month. That's a $550,000 increase, 45% increase. It was a wow. And he looked at me with shock on his face. Color was literally drained from his face. He was ashen colored, and he said, where did you learn this? And I know he was thinking maybe I had an inside track with some of the biggest sales gurus on the planet. And I made the mistake in my zeal. I said, well, I learned it from Moses. And I think he thought I meant that I literally somehow reached into the dead and contacted Moses on the phone or something. And I had to explain, no. I try to tell him where I got this in the 7 questions Moses had to have asked. And he looked at me like, I don't understand this. I don't think I'm going to ask any more questions right now. And he walked away because he was just like, this is the strangest thing. But my friend, it proved the concept. It was a proof of concept. Do these questions, do they work in business? Not only did it work for him, but it worked for his entire sales team and brought an extra $550,000 actually in revenue within 30 days. Do you want to see that kind of revenue? I think so. Most people do. So let's get into it. Let me dive right into the Moses questioning strategy right here, right now. As you know, it says, then Moses sent them to spy out Canaan and say, go up the way into the south and go up to the mountains and see the land, what it is. Okay? What are we looking at here? What are we talking about here? What is this? I call it big picture. These are the big picture questions, the general circumstantial questions where you learn relevant information about your prospect, their business, their history, whatever. It's somewhat generic, but you're diving into who they are, what they're about. And the purpose of circumstantial questioning is to learn more about their world. See, most salespeople, when they go on a call, they're just waiting for the first chance they can to unload everything you know. They suit up, they show up, they throw up, and they leave. That's wrong. That's why they're not successful. The purpose of asking the circumstantial questions is you want to find out more about their world. And a second reason for this line of questioning is to find out what the company values, what's important to them. Let me give you an example. I had a client that sold rebar. The company is called Ambassador Steel. They're up in Illinois and Indiana, a few places. At the time, they were several $100 million a year in business. And they told me, if you can help us increase our profit by 1/4 of 1%, we'll be ecstatic. Because on $300 million, a quarter percent increase in profit was going to be healthy to them. And they were going to be saying, man, it'd be worth it, what we're having to pay you to come and do the training for us. I said, okay, I got it. So what I did was I spent a week, one day with each of 5 of their salespeople. They have a lot more than 5 guys, but we picked 5 in multi-state area. And I remember who we called on. See, they called on contractors, not the kind that pour concrete in your driveway. We called on the contractors that were their customers that build football stadiums and hotels and hospitals and that kind of, big structures. That's who their clients were, those kind of companies. So we walk into one big contractor's office and they had, it was beautiful to go up to whatever floor it was where the buyer was and purchasing agent, whatever his title was, I'm not sure. But he was an executive, that I can tell you. And the beautiful paintings, pictures, of lush office, right? And on the way up, the salesman says to me, now, Michael, I just want to tell you right now, rebar gets buried in the concrete. Nobody ever sees it again. It's a commodity. The only thing, he stressed, the only thing that matters is we must be the low-cost bidder to get the business. Do you understand that? I said, I understand exactly what you're saying. But what I was observing as I was walking in was these people, this company was very successful. So when we got in, I asked after I was introduced, I asked the buyer, I said, tell me more about what you do. So he starts telling me, well, we built the stadium for the Arizona Cardinals or whatever team it was. We built this stadium and that stadium. I said, wow. I said, how do you get those jobs? We said, we bid on them. Oh, you bid on them. Now, I usually ask questions I know the answer to. But anyway, I said, okay, you bid on them. So are you the lowest bidder every time? He laughed. He said, almost never. We're almost never the lowest bidder. I said, you're kidding. You mean other people are bidding less than you, but you still get the job? He said, well, yeah. I said, are you ripping them off? He knew I was going somewhere with it. He said, no. I said, well, what do you mean then? He said, well, we get our jobs done on time and high quality and under budget. So they love us. So they know that about us. We've got a great reputation. So we don't have to be the low cost bidder. I said, the reason I'm asking that is because Marty here, the sales rep, that's not his real name, he seemed to think that they had to be the low-cost bidder to get your job. But clearly, you're not the low-cost bidder, and you get the business, and you're doing very, very well because you deliver other things like quality and speed of service and so forth. I said, do they have to be the low-cost bidder to get your business? Well, he just told me that these other things were more important, quality, delivery times, and all those kinds of things, keeping your schedule, keeping your word. He said, no, as long as you're within 5%. 5% from lowest to what he was accept. 5% is 20 times higher than a quarter. In other words, a 1/4% increase, that's 20 1/4% increases. Just that one conversation was worth 20 times more than what the owners of the rebar company were hoping for. They wanted a 1/4% increase. This was 5%. That's 20 times more. Amazing stuff. So, but I'm asking these questions because I'm finding out what they value. And they don't value the low cost. They valued, in this case, quality and deliverability and a number of other factors, which my client, Ambassador Steele, had that in spades. See, it's important to know when it comes to time to discuss the benefits of what you have to offer, so you can tie in your strong points to the ones they consider very important in their own business, which is exactly what we did there. It's hard for a customer who says they have great quality and they boast about it in their product and then minimize the importance of you having great quality, right? So that's why, one of the reasons why I'm asking these questions. First one is to learn more about them. The second one is to find out what's important to them. The third reason for circumstantial questioning is it puts the customer at ease and it develops rapport. Now, I've said oftentimes people prefer to do business with somebody they like. It's not the strongest motivation, but it's an important one. And so you want to definitely do that. And people like people, as the Harvard psychologist bore out, they like people who ask questions and ask follow-up questions far more than they like people who just spew out information and boast about themselves. So some of the questions you can ask, it's going to depend entirely on what kind of business you're in, right? So whether you're selling vitamins or weight loss or rebar or automobiles, it's going to vary greatly. But I've got some examples here in a B2B situation. What's the nature of your business, or how long have you been in business, or how many locations do you have? How many employees do you have? What's the state of the industry? Tell me about that. Who are your main competitors? What separates you from the competition? And by the way, that question, what separates you from your competition, is so powerful question. See, these are strategic questions. What separates you from the competition? They'll say, well, we have, and they're going to say one of three things. We're either the low-cost provider, or we have a better quality product, or our service is better. Those are really the three ways you can differentiate yourself. And so they're going to talk about one of those three things, or maybe two of them, and we're going to hear that. But that's when you learn what separates them from the competition, that's what they say is important. So now you know that if you have the same thing, you can let them know when it comes time for you to share your advantages. What are the strengths of your market in the marketplace? What have you been most successful at? There's 100 questions you could ask here. These are circumstantial questions, just enough to give you a flavor of the industry, the company, the market, the economy, all those things. How's business going during COVID-19, for example? A lot of different things you can ask. So that's the first one. The second one is there any wood? This has to do with purpose. So the first one's big picture. The second one is purpose, which has to do with vision and goals. Okay? It's what are they trying to build? What do they want? How's it going? What motivates them? You see, the wood, and say, well, what's that got to do with wood? Imagine this. Think about it. Picture it. Okay? Get a vision of this. They're going into the promised land, and Moses wants to know, is there any wood? Why? What are you going to build your house with? You want to build your house with, a lot of times, with wood. You're going to build your farm implements with wood. You're going to build, not that part that actually tears up the soil, but the handles and the whole rest of the plow. You're going to build your boats with what? Concrete? No, you're going to build your boats with wood. In other words, the wood represents what you're going to build. It represents your future. It represents your vision, your dreams, your goals. So you want to explore this. So here is where you're looking for the prospect goals, their vision. You want to see if you can find a way to come alongside the business and help them meet their goals with your product or service. Now, when I was helping the air conditioning company and I was telling them about this, they said to me, some of the sales guys said, oh, these contractors, they don't have any goals. They don't have any dreams. That's a stupid question to ask a contractor. And I said, really? What time do they start their day? Well, they get up, 5 o'clock in the morning. Why? Because they got a lot of stuff to get ready and get their team ready before they send them out in the field, right? And then they send them out in the field and they work hard all day long, and the heat of the day, and they bear the brunt of that heat. And then when it's all over, they come back, put everything in the shop, they lock everything up, then they go home and they do the paperwork. Okay? So it's a big, big deal. And I said, you think they're doing that just for fun? Of course not. They're doing that. Why? Because they have a dream. Maybe that dream is to pay off their house. Maybe it's to put their kids through college. Maybe it's just to give them a better standard of living. Who knows? But I promise you, they have a dream, and you need to find out what it is so that you can come alongside them. See, they may have production goals, sales goals, quality goals, or some combination of those to meet an internal goal. And maybe the goal is more subjective. Maybe it's weight loss. Maybe it's like getting a promotion. Maybe it's a raise. Maybe it's a bonus. It doesn't matter what it is. You should find out what it is. And then listen and see how what you have to offer will help them and their company reach their goals. And when the customer sees that you are someone who wants to work with them to achieve a common goal instead of someone sparring with them to meet your goal to get the sale to put money in your pocket, you're going to have a much better chance of succeeding. Next, it says whether the land is good or bad, fat or lean. This has to do with potential. And there's really two areas. The good or bad has to do with qualifying, and then the fat or lean has to do with whether what they're doing, what they're utilizing, what they're trusting to get them to where they want to go is actually working. So good or bad, it's somewhat generic, true, but this is where you ask qualifying questions for your business to see if it's a good opportunity. For example, every business has a few questions that you can ask that will quickly determine whether there's a basis to continue or not. Did they buy last month? Oh, or too late. Or can they afford it? I mean, think of a real estate agent, right? The real estate agent is going out on calls, or excuse me, he's got a guy who calls him about a house, and they spend 3 weeks going and looking at 21 houses, and they finally put an offer on it, and then he goes to apply for a mortgage, and oh, he doesn't qualify. He wasted 3 weeks of time. That's why you want to find out, is this good or bad? You want to find that out as soon as you can by asking the 2 or 3 or 4 qualifying questions that help you to know whether you should invest your time in it or not. Then there's the fat or lean part of this. Now, the word fat in the Greek here, or the Hebrew, excuse me, means plenteous. And lean means thin or famished. So in sales, we want to find out whether their system or their way of doing things has been fruitful or productive for them. I want to know, is this working for you? It's very important. Is their current system yielding a good financial return? And if it is, compared to what? Or as I like to hear it sometimes, how high is high? Or perhaps is it famished, costing them a small fortune and they don't even know it? So I'm going to ask questions that help me understand this. Is what they're doing working? And say, well, yeah, it's working. Really, compared to what? Compared to what? Horse and buggy was working fine until Henry Ford came along, and it wasn't long before they realized, well, this isn't working so good. I want what he's got, right? So there's this thing called a pain index. And the premise of the pain index is this, that people don't usually change until they feel the pain of remaining the same. Your job and my job is to help our prospects realize that they have pain, and with their help, we're going to correctly diagnose it. Then and only then, we're going to prescribe a course of treatment. And the model that I like to use for that is called the pain index. Let's take a look. P stands for problems. This is where you're going to ask questions that reveal the problems. You might ask a question like, what specific challenges or hurdles are you dealing with that have made forward progress difficult? You can ask any question, but this is one that's going to reveal a problem. And then when they tell you the answer to that, then you go into the A, which stands for assess. You want to assess the cause and effect. Where do these problems come from? What is their cause? What effect are they having on morale, performance, income, all kinds of things? You want to assess that. Then you're going to say, okay, implications. The I stands for implications. If you don't find a solution, what do you think the long-term consequence will be? I mean, the short-term problem is one thing. The long-term thing could be very serious if you don't deal with it. And then once they've come to that conclusion, the N stands for next. And it's very simple. What would you like to do next? What would you like to do now? So this is the model. Now let me take you through it in some ways that will probably challenge your thinking a little bit. You ready? I'm going to show you how a jackass, an actual donkey, models this in Scripture. Now, if a jackass can figure this out, say I tongue in cheek, but it actually happened. It's in the book of Numbers. And Balaam was this prophet. He was putting himself out for hire. He'd been hired by basically the bad guys to prophesy something good over them. So he thought, hey, it's not bad money. A gig is a gig. Let's go. And he's riding his jackass on his way to do this deed for money. And the Bible says in Numbers 22, verse 33, it says, now, the donkey saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way with his sword drawn in his hand. And the donkey turned aside out of the way and went into the field. So there's a problem. And then it says, The Lord opened the eyes of Balaam a little bit later, a few verses later, opened the eyes, and he saw the angel of the Lord standing in the way and a sword drawn in his hand, and he bowed down his head and he fell flat on his face. See, Balaam had a problem. There was an angel blocking the way, but he didn't see it. He didn't see it. And the angel of the Lord was blocking his path, and his donkey refused to go any further. And so what happened? Balaam beat the donkey. But the donkey wasn't the problem. He was only the symptom of the problem. Balaam's action was similar to having a warning light go off in your car. Instead of trying to treat the problem, you get a hammer and you knock out the warning light, right? So many times our prospects are treating or beating their symptoms because they cannot see the real problem. You want them to see the problem. Your job is to open their eyes to the real problem or obstacles through the use of questions. Don't tell them, ask them. I have a motto. I say, don't tell anybody, don't tell a prospect anything you can ask them. It's a good rule. So let's look at the cause and effect. Then the Lord opened the mouth of the donkey, and she said to Balaam, what have I done to you that you've struck me these 3 times? What? The symptoms were not the problem, and the donkey, instead of telling Balaam what the problem was, began reasoning with them, leading him through the use of questions, inferring that he needed to look elsewhere for the cause of his problem. Now imagine that. It's one thing to have a donkey talk to you, right? That doesn't happen every day. But the donkey, instead of saying, didn't you see the angel is right there? He says, he asks him a question. He's leading him through a process of discovery. Here's how you can apply that. Do you think the inefficiency is because of your employees, or think it's possible they're being asked to accomplish more than their tools, their computer, their lathe, their saw, their truck, whatever it is, will allow? So I'm leading somebody in a process by asking a question. And better yet, when the prospect identifies a problem or even a symptom, simply ask them, what do you think causes that? Why do you think that's happening? Then ask them to share with you what they think the effect of that is. All right? Now let's take a look at implications. So the donkey's still talking, right? The donkey says to Balaam, am I not your donkey on which you've ridden ever since I became yours to this day? Was I ever disposed to do this to you? Imagine this, the donkey is just question after question. The donkey presses his line of questioning further with Balaam, apparently amazed that Balaam couldn't yet see the problem. The donkey was in effect saying, hey, we've been together a long time. Suddenly I stop on a path. Now catch this, Balaam. And I refuse to move. You think maybe there might be a problem that you don't see? Okay. Have you considered, Balaam, the implications of my refusal to move forward, even though you've beaten me with a stick 3 times? Think about it, Balaam. There might be something more to this. So what you want to do is help your customers not only discover the problems and identify the root cause and effect, but also dig deeper and discover the implications. And it was only after Balaam thought of the implications that the Lord opened his eyes to see and understand the problem. Balaam said, I have sinned. I did not know you stood in the way against me, Lord. Now therefore, if it displeases you, I will turn back. See, once he saw the problem, this is the key thing. He was ready to take the next step. He'd seen the problem, the cause and effect, the implications. He got it through. And now because he'd gotten there, he's like, now I understand not just the symptom, but the root problem. I get it. What should I do next? You want me to turn back? And once your prospect sees the full extent of the problem, simply ask them, what would you like to do about that now? Or what do you see as a logical next step? Or would you like a hand with that? Would you like a hand with that? No pressure. This pressure closing is nonsense. Simple like this. Don't tell them, ask them. Now, I'll give you a quick example. I was with another client. They sold heavy-duty Mazak equipment. That's CNC equipment. That's the kind of equipment that they use in manufacturing plants to make, auto parts, airplane parts, or whatever, metal things. I didn't know much about it, but that was the client. And they asked me to go out with one of their salespeople and evaluate him. Why? Because he'd been with them 6 months, hadn't made a first sale. They said to me, look, he looks like a sales guy. His dress is nice. He's got a briefcase, very friendly, clean cut, nice guy, smart. But in 6 months, he hasn't got any business. We don't understand why. We really like him. Can you work with him a day and see what you come up with? So I said, sure. So I spent the day with him. And on one of our early calls in the morning, we pull up to this big manufacturing place. I said, what are we doing here? He said, well, about a month ago, they indicated they were interested in one of our XYZ models. And so I'm following up to see if they're ready to buy. I said, well, have you given him a proposal yet? He said, well, I gave him a brochure at the time and I wrote the price on it right on the top, $68,000. I said, and so what follow-up have you done since then? He said, well, that's what we're doing here today. So there's obviously a problem. Guy's interested. He gives him a brochure and it's over a month before he follows up. That's a problem, but that's what we're doing today, right? So we walk in the lobby, and as it just happened, the owner of this pretty sizable manufacturing facility had come into the lobby and he saw us and he said, stop, you're too late. I just bought from your competitor yesterday. And at that moment, the salesperson turned on his heels and started walking back out the door. And I stopped him. I said, hang on a second. And I said to the owner, I said, I'm not with this company, and it's obvious that they weren't able to offer you enough value to make you want to do business with them. But would you mind telling me when you say you just bought yesterday, I mean, have you signed a contract? He said, oh yeah, we signed the contract. We FedExed it yesterday. I said, have you paid? He said, yeah, we sent it off with a check. I said, do you have the equipment? He said, yeah, it's been installed for a month. I mean, we're done. So at that point, let me ask you, what are the chances that we're going to walk out with a sale? If you were making that call, what would you do? What would you do? A lot of people would do what Marty did. That's not his real name, but turn and walk out. And that guy went on to say, by the way, it was $53,000. It was $15,000 less, in his words, for the very same thing. Different model, different company, but same thing. I said, really, $53,000? That must be quite a machine. Can we take a look at it? And you have to understand, I didn't even know where the on-off button was on a Mazak. I didn't know what CNC stood for. I knew nothing, but I knew how to ask questions. So he said, sure, come on. We went back into the plant, and he showed it to me. And it was in operation. It's part of an assembly line. And I was making some part. And as we were talking, the machine made a rather loud thunking noise. Thunk. And I said, what was that? He said, oh, I don't know. And so I kept looking at the machine. I said, well, it doesn't seem like the operator is taking any corrective action. What do you make here? He said, well, we make precision parts. I said, really? Yeah, very fine tolerances. Really? Yeah. I said, is it possible that the part that he's working on right now, because of that thunk, might not be within those tolerances? Oh, yeah. And is it possible that it can get through the entire assembly line and out the door and ship to a customer, and they get it and then they discover that the part is faulty? Oh, yeah, that happens. I said, when that happens, do they mind? Oh, yeah, but we replace it within 48 hours. I said, really? Okay. And so I kept asking questions about their business and what they do. The machine made another thunk. And I should tell you this, for what it's worth, while we're having this conversation, have you ever had the Holy Spirit speak to you? He says he'll show you things to come. Well, it happened. It happened. He said, before you leave here, you're going to walk out of here with a contract. I laughed out loud. So I kept asking questions because I thought, wow, that's interesting. The machine made another loud thunk noise. I said, what's that? And by this time, the foreman came over. He said, man, we've been having a lot of problems. And the owner said, well, we had it on trial for 30 days, and we've had this problem a lot in the last month. He said, in fact, it took them 3 days to get here to fix it one time. I said, 3 days? Really? I said, and that's when they were trying to impress you with their service. Uh-huh. I said, do you think their service will improve now that they've got the contract, they got the check, and the equipment's all installed? Do you think now that that's over, their service will get better, the response times will be quicker or slower? I said, do you think the machine will work better with use over time and age, or will it get less efficient and work less well? And beads of blood were forming on his forehead, not literally. And he's like, wow. And then the foreman says, we have, turns to his boss, he said, we've got in Tennessee a 3-day right of rescission, 3 days before the contract becomes absolutely binding. And I said, really? Of course, I knew what that was. I said, how does that work? And he explained what I already knew. They have 72 hours. I said, really? 72 hours before it's binding. How long ago did you sign the contract? Well, that was yesterday. Oh. So that leaves how much time then? 72 minus 24 is 48 hours. 48 hours. Huh. I simply then said, what would you like to do? What would you like to do? Simple question. What do you want to do next? I didn't try to close him in the traditional way. Hey, if you do this by noon, we'll do this. What would you like to do next? And he said this, let's go for lunch. And we went for lunch. And how much is that equipment again? And we did the same thing and showed him it's $68,000. It's this, and this. And he signed the contract, gave us a check, and we walked out with the order. He exercised his right of rescission on the other one. and got out of that deal. My friends, that is the power of the right kinds of questionings. And the questions that I asked were in keeping with the Moses strategy. The questioning strategy that is there that I showed you are the kinds of questions that I ask. If you will ask those questions, you won't always get the sale, but you'll get a lot more. I mean, the people at the survey, they got 72% more business because they asked 5 questions or more than the guys who only asked 2 questions or less. They didn't have the Moses questioning strategy. They just asked more questions. I'm telling you, if you have a good strategy, you can absolutely multiply your sales. That's been my experience. You know, when I got into sales, I started thinking, actually, I've been in sales for a long time, but when I moved to this country from Canada, I'd been in sales, I think at that time, maybe 10 years or so. And I got a job selling copiers. And on the first day, the boss said to me, Michael, here's what we expect. For every 4 or 5 copier presentations you make, you should make 1 sale. The national average is 1 out of 4. And we don't expect any sales your first month. We want 2 the second month, and then 4 sales a month thereafter. Okay? That's what they expect. Now, I was with the company 2 years. I didn't see anybody make 6 sales the first 90 days they were there, but I understood the rules. But I was bothered by that because selling 1 out of 4, which was the national average, meant failing 3 out of 4 times. And I said, what farmer plants 4 rows of corn and prays to God that just 1 of them comes up? It makes no sense. And that's when I picked up my Bible. I said, I'm going to find principles and strategies and tactics and specific things that I can apply deliberately and consciously to the sales process. And instead of selling 1 out of 4, I intend to sell 1 out of 1. Everybody thought I was crazy, but 90 days later at the first company meeting that I was part of, the quarterly review, you know, it's at a country club. In the morning, it's all business. In the afternoon, it's all golf. But in the morning, every salesperson has to get up and put the results on a screen and say, as I did, I've been here 90 days. I've made X number of calls, made X number of demonstrations, made X number of sales for X number of dollars. Everybody had to do that. When it came my turn, I said, I've been here 90 days. I've done 22 demos. And I'm pleased to report to you that I also have 22 sales. It was 1 out of 1, 3.5 times the number that nobody had ever, that I ever saw anybody hit, and 3.5 times the quota. Pretty stout, right? I finished the year off, but didn't maintain 100%, by the way. It fell down to about 91, 92%, something like that for the year. Also, by the way, it was the most copiers ever sold in a single year by anybody, even though I was only in the territory 10.5 months, by anybody that was a regular commercial rep like I was. So that was my entree into finding biblical principles for business. So I'm telling you, Moses questioning is just it's just the door opener. There's so much good stuff. But let me finish this up for you. It says, whether the people that dwell in it, are they strong or weak? Are they few or many? This has to do with problems. We tend to think people can be problematic, right? But you're looking for some issues with the competition, and you're looking for the severity of the problems. So don't be afraid to let the prospect identify what they like about your competitor. Nothing wrong with that. Because why? Because you have to either match or exceed that or offset it somehow, right? It's better to know what you're up against and why it matters to them so that you can match it or somehow offset it. So I've often asked, what is it about your current supplier you like most? Oh, we like whatever it is. Really? Tell me more. And you get it. And then you're thinking in your own mind, well, we do that, or we don't do that. We do it way better than that. Or whatever it is. Now you know. What would a perfect relationship with the supplier look like to you? When they answer that question, they're revealing, generally speaking, that they don't have a perfect relationship, and here's what's missing, which, bingo, hopefully you can offer that as well. Then you can say, well, how would that perfect relationship help you? So now he's giving you ammunition so that if you have the thing that they're wishing they had, then you can then say, and here's how this helps you. Another question I love asking is, if you were a 51% owner of your current supplier and you could change anything at all about the way they do business with you, what would you change? That question reveals a whole cornucopia of weaknesses that you can then exploit. Really, tell me more. Why is that important? How does it hurt? What happens when it happens? Really, if that continues, what's the long-term consequence of that? And what do you want to do about that? That's the sequence. It just works over and over and over again. Okay, and then lastly, you got picture, purpose, potential, problems, and permanence. Whether the cities they dwell in are tents or strongholds. Essentially, what you want to find out are 2 things. It's whether the prospect you're talking to, are they thinking long-term or short-term? And the second thing you want to find out is whether the competition, the people that are already entrenched in there, are they thinking long-term or short-term? In other words, are they stabbing a customer, taking advantage of them, giving poor service? That's the equivalent of living in a tent. Or have they built a fortress of stellar customer service, making it impenetrable by you. You want to find that out about your competition. Second thing, you want to find out about the customer themselves. Are they always looking for the cheapest price? That's somebody who lives in a tent, or they understand quality. So you want to find these kind of things out, right? And then it says, be of courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. At the end of the call, you always want to do this one thing, regardless of whether you close the sale or not. Maybe you're getting a continuation. What you want to do is, let's agree on what's next. What's next? So maybe it's a proposal. Maybe it's, if you're closing a deal, let me get a down payment. Let me get a signed contract. Let's not just say, hey, okay, that sounds good to us. We'll work on it. Get something tangible. Moses wanted him to bring back something tangible. Don't come back and just tell me how big the grapes were. Bring some of them back. Bring something tangible back. I want it marked down. I want to see it with my own eyes. And so you always want to end a meeting with something tangible if you can, especially when you're making a sale. So friends, that is the Moses questioning strategy. Big picture, purpose questions, potential questions, problem questions, permanence questions. When you go through those questions and you take a customer through that process, you are leading them to something that's in their best interest. That's part of your motivation. It should be, is to lead them to an outcome that's in their best interest, because it'll be mutually rewarding. Does it work? It works phenomenally well. Now I'm going to ask you another question. Would you like to know how you stack up with a biblical worldview when it comes to selling? Would you be interested in taking what we call a biblical SAT, or a biblical sales aptitude test? Here, let me show you what that's about. I put together BSAT, a BSAT, Biblical Sales Aptitude Test for you. There's a short video that gives you the basic instructions, but the bottom line is this. There are 35 multiple choice questions. Yes, no, true, false, 1 to 5, whatever they are. And you get through these 35 questions, and it won't take you long to actually answer the questions, because they're easy to answer. Whether yes, no, multiple choice are always quicker than essay questions, right? When you finish the test, when you finish these 35 questions, you'll know a lot more about how aligned you are with biblical wisdom as it pertains to sales, right? Then, if you want to, you can get the answers. There's something called the BSAT answer key. And that page has the answers to all the questions. I don't want you to see all the answers right now, but they're highlighted in red. The nice thing about this is that if you're wondering, I had a different answer than Michael Pink shows. Why is that? Well, every one of these is a video. Sometimes they're 45 seconds long. Sometimes they're 2 or 3 minutes. On average, they're about 2 minutes long. Okay. But what this does is it will give you the rationale, the biblical wisdom for why these things are true. And you get into whether it's the Moses questioning strategy, or the negotiating secrets of the Apostle Paul, or a ton of other things, the presentation strategies of Peter, or the motivational secrets of the 10 Commandments. There's so much biblical wisdom to be gleaned from the Bible that is strategic, purposeful, intentional, that actually generates a result, a measurable, tangible result that my clients love. So listen, take the test if you want to, and then when you get to the bottom of the test, you get to the bottom of the answers. If you want to, you can actually get access to some more free training. That takes you to another page, which is sellingamongwolves.com, and it takes you to a page where you get access to another, I think it's 26-minute video of pure teaching. When that video is finished, it drops down and gives you a bunch more free stuff. So our motivation is to give. Before we ask you for anything, we want you to know who we are, what our thinking is, what our worldview is, what is the credibility of what we're teaching, and does it work for you? Does it resonate with you? Is it the kind of thing you're looking for? Is it the kind of thing that will help you? By the way, when you access the free training, you'll see on there, I got a very nice endorsement from the Ziegler organization when I did some training for them. I've done a lot of wonderful things that you'll see and learn about there. How this actually, we took a company they had 12 agents, commercial real estate guys. They got down to 3, and they said, Michael, can you help us before we go out of business? 3 guys were looking for another job. I said, sure. I worked with them directly for 6 months, and at the end of 6 months, their sales were up 900%. Can you help me for another year? Yes. Can you help me for one more year after that? Okay, but that's it. At the end of 3 years, it was up 11,350%, and guess what? Made the Inc. 500 as the fastest growing real estate brokerage in the history of the Inc. 500, and the 16th fastest growing privately held company in America. Friends, I'm telling you, a biblical approach works phenomenally well. So check this thing out. When you get to the test, you take the test questions, go to the end, check out the videos. They're all free, good information as to why that happens. Listen, I just want to say thank you, everyone. Thank you to Peter for inviting me to be part of this. I just want to promise you folks something, that if you will apply what the Bible says and do what it says and follow those principles and strategies, your chances of success go up exponentially. You don't have to conform to the world. You don't have to be a hard closer. I always say, if you have to use a hard close, you're doing something wrong. So join me, come inside there, take your BSAT test. It's so important. Take that test, see how you stand up on that, how you stack up, how you compare, and measure your results to the answers. See what you think. All right, friends. Thank you so much. God bless you. Thank you, Peter. It's been a blast. Goodbye.